Howdy, everybody. So, in this video, we're going to talk about the role government often plays in business. And, owner operators, you need to be aware of the business environment and the political environment. And and you say, well, you don't really care about politics. I'm like, okay, well, um, whether you participate in politics or not, it does have an impact on your business. So, for example, you don't follow politics, you don't participate, you don't care. I get it. A lot of times I don't care either. But um, if the politicians create rules and regulations for the industry, that affects your business. So, whether you participate in politics or not, you are going to feel the impact of government. You can't escape it. Even taxes is political. Rules and regulations, political. Truck, you know, DOT inspections and things like that, based on rules and regulations that politicians create. So, you could say you're not political, but you're operating in a political environment. So, what happens a lot of times is, the government, you know, does a lot of good things, but then they also pick winners and losers. And when they hand out, you know, programs to corporations, it's corporate welfare. Just like, you know, you have people who take advantage of welfare programs are like welfare queens, but some of the biggest welfare queens in the country are corporations. They always have their hand out, and the government bails them out. General Motors, for example, automotive industry in general. You know, uh, you can look at tariffs protecting industries, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not, but it is government that is, taking some kind of action that benefits corporations or an entire industry, like the steel industry. It's kind of like government cheese. You know, your grandparents, or maybe your great grandparents, probably know what government cheese is. I know what it is. It's a big block of cheese that the government used to give to people that, were struggling. It's, and I've eaten it before. It's good cheese. It's free. I don't know if they still do it or not, but they used to. Uh, Way back, decades ago, they used to be government cheese. Now they have the SNAP program, and you see all the abuse that goes on with that. But you look at the role government plays, and they allow, unfair labor practices in the United States. For example, immigrant labor. These are people that shouldn't even be here, but they're getting their CDLs. And some of that's not the federal government, that's the state government. They're issuing CDLs to people that are that weren't born and raised here, don't even speak the language. So here we have the government providing welfare to individuals, to organizations, to certain segments of the population, preferential treatment. It's like, have you ever seen small businesses that are female owned or women owned companies, but their husband is the president of the company? So the business is in the wife's name. Well, why is that? Well, it's because the Small Business Administration gives favorable loans to female owned companies, lower interest rate. You know, is that fair competition? We see unfair competition everywhere we turn. Why are drivers from Canada and Mexico operating within the continental U.S.? Why when I go to a truck stop in Missouri, I park next to a truck from Canada? That's kind of like unfair competition. So we see this over and over again where the government meddles into things. We don't have a free market. We don't have a market based on merit. We have a distorted market, and we have unfair trade practices, we have unfair labor practices, we have unfair rules and regulations, we have uneven enforcement, so it's pretty tough for a small business owner to navigate through all these hoops and hurdles and be successful. And every time you try to reach a goal, based on your own merit, which is hard work, here comes someone else that the government just handed it to. Like say for illegal immigrants getting free health care and free housing. But meanwhile, we have homeless veterans. So obviously the veterans have merit. They served, they contributed to society. But yet they go homeless while the person who crosses the border illegally gets free housing and free health care. This is the unfortunate consequence of poor politics. And you could throw your hands up in the air and say there's nothing you can do. But I think the solution is at the ballot box. You have, as a small business owner, you should be thinking of supporting organizations like OOIDA that have lobbyists in Washington that support your values, your goals. And similarly, when you go to the ballot box, you support those politicians that support your values and your goals. So if and it doesn't have to be one party or the other, whichever is the better candidate. Let the best candidate win. That sometimes that's one party, sometimes it's the other party. But if the candidate's saying they're going to raise taxes on small business, do you really want to support that candidate? Or if the candidate says we need more rules, more regulations, do we really need more rules and regulations in trucking? How about we enforce the rules we already have on the books, that says that you can't be in the country illegally, and these foreign drivers can't be on the, from Canada or Mexico, they're not U.S. based. Why don't you enforce those rules before you start creating new rules? So it's a tough environment for small trucking companies, owner-operators. It's a tough environment we operate in, economically and politically. And, sometimes you think, well, why, if I put in the hard work, if I put in the hours, if I put in the miles, why can I not be successful? Why does it always seem like I'm having the rug pulled out from underneath me? Well, it's largely because the politicians sold you down the river. They need votes, to stay in office, and so they cater to certain groups. They'll say, well, we need more female voters, so we will give special treatment to female small business owners, for example. They'll get loans that you can't get because they qualify for these government programs. It's the government cheese, the government welfare. That's one perspective. Another perspective is like, well, look, U.S. is a great big melting pot, and the government is the stir rod that stirs the pot, so that everything gets like evenly distributed. It sounds great in theory. It sounds great, like, oh, let's help the disadvantages, things like that. But when you do a government handout, you create dependency. You're not helping anybody by making them dependent on the government. It's like you give them SNAP program, food stamps, government cheese. Okay, that's fine, but they shouldn't be lifelong dependent on government assistance. They should be able to someday get off of government assistance and become self-sufficient. You know, everybody needs a helping hand occasionally. You know, that's fine, but it shouldn't be a lifelong lifestyle. So you know, you could say you don't care about politics, and you know, I don't disagree with you. However, the only way to get better policy, to get better rules and regulations, is to get better politicians. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.